Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear,
business consultant.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.
Welcome. I'm Jay Shear with Jay Shear Business Consulting. We build solid foundations for service-based businesses to grow and scale and achieve the results and success they deserve. And you've joined Business Minds Coffee Chat. Our guest is a husband and father to 5 kids. He was a freestyle breakdancer for 10 years. He was stung by 53 bees in 4th grade and survived a high-speed accident that resulted in 52 staples in both legs. He's someone who knows that adversity gives us strength. So fast forward to today, he's built an extensive online community of over 60,000 followers and over 3 million views on LinkedIn. He started his own business and he's the host of a successful podcast. Please welcome the man who's a massive Portland Trail Blazers fan and helps entrepreneurs blaze their own trail, Jordan Mendoza. Jordan, it's so great to see you. Thank you for being here today.
Hey, listen, it's my pleasure. Anytime I can come and speak to an audience and hopefully add some value, it's an honor. So thank you so much, Jay. And what an amazing introduction. Do you do this for everybody? Because you made me sound way cooler than I am. So I appreciate that.
Absolutely. You're so welcome. And I tell you, researching you and getting to know you has been a fantastic experience for me. I've learned a lot, and you and I had an opportunity to have a conversation a while back, which just really hit me in a number of ways. And we're going to chat about those on today's show. But sure. I've got to ask you this. So, I mean, the obvious question to really kick it off is around freestyle breakdancing. So 10 years of breakdancing. So first, do you still breakdance? But then what I'd really love to hone in on is, what did you learn through that experience that you carry with you today?
Yeah, man. So, man, a lot of lessons as a breakdancer, because you fail a lot when you start anything, right? I think that should be a lesson for anyone watching or listening to this, that it doesn't matter what you're starting, you're going to fail a lot. So I think, understanding that, but not giving up, like you have to persevere. I remember, one of the moves that I really, really wanted to learn was the windmill, right? Because it's a power move. It's the move where you're essentially spinning on your shoulder blade with your legs spread apart, and you're continuing that motion over and over again. And so it looks like a windmill, just like that. And man, I practiced it so hard, and I remember you wanted to give up so many times, and then something clicked. It was like my leg I positioned it in a new way, and when I did it that one time, that momentum allowed me to do the move. And I remember doing that, and then I remember doing it like 20 spins, and I would just get so good at it. But man, it was all about the repetition. And this is something I talk to my clients about all the time. I don't care if you want to do breakdancing. I don't care if you want to be a juggler. I don't care what you want to do, but it's all about the reps. If you're not putting in the time and energy, you're never going to create the momentum that you need to get those results.
Yeah, such a powerful statement. I love the way that you articulated that. And, as you were talking through it and describing that particular move, I could actually see you doing it, right? Because it really is, it's so cool looking when it's executed the right way, just like anything else. 100%. Anytime we become proficient with something and we've put in the reps, like you just said, of course, from an outsider looking in, it looks easy. Right. Yeah, but what you're not focusing on is how much work went into getting you to that point. So great. I appreciate you sharing that example.
And to answer the other question, I still do breakdance, and I shared a video recently. I think I shared it on Instagram Reels, and it was just kind of like a 30-second clip of just some popping and gliding and things like that. And I was surprised that it got, it's almost like 700 something plays on Reels, and most of my other stuff doesn't perform that well. And I'm like, you know what? Maybe I start sharing more of that content. I think you got to listen to your audience, right? And if viewership goes up for one thing and doesn't for the other, that to me, that's kind of a sign that says maybe the audience wants to see more of this. So now I'm going to make a commitment on this show, Jay, that you'll start to see more of that content. Because listen, I love it. I love to dance. I love just to freestyle pop and breakdance because it's an art form, right? It's a way that I can express myself through motion and rhythm and feel each beat that comes and vibrates through the ground. That's what I'm doing when I'm doing that, and it's something I miss, to be honest with you. And I haven't really thought about since I posted that video and saw the engagement, and I was like, man, this is okay to post. This is cool to show this side of me.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting. And I get it, trying to decide whether this is the type of content that I should put out there, especially if it's not something that you historically had been putting out. But then you have to look at the indicators, right? So if
100%.
you're serving your community with content that's resonating with them, and there's you're focused on the end game, right? How do I attract attention in a very crowded space and bring people into my world where they can now find out about what I do, how I serve, and how I can help them? That's a great place to be. And I'll just share with you real quick that I'm involved in a mastermind right now that is really pushing me hard outside of my comfort zone when it comes to video content and putting out video content that is just not what I typically would do, right? Just being very in the moment, just taking my phone and going Facebook Live and just sharing, right? Just sharing whatever is on my mind, what's relevant. So I feel you on that. So you've had a very successful career up to this point in property management and sales training and leadership development. What was the catalyst for starting your own business?
Man, I think it was having a lot of people ask me why I hadn't done it already. People seeing things in me that I didn't see in myself, right? I think, a lot of seeds get planted in our lives, and if we don't cultivate those seeds, they don't come to fruition. And so for me, I think it was a seed planted by numerous successful, high net worth individuals that were saying, you can do this. When you're ready, you're going to crush it. Because in all honesty, Jay, the business has been here for about 4 years, but it was always the side hustle. It wasn't the main thing. And so I always put side hustle time into it, right? And so this little thing called 2020 hits, and we all got this amazing free gift of extra time for those of you in the audience that now maybe don't have to commute in, right? So for me, it was 3 hours, hour and a half there and back. And what I decided to do at that time is invest it into my business and into my podcasts. And so, 80 guests later on the show and 30 plus as a guest in 2020 and serving lots of new clients and putting in that repetition, that's what enabled me to go out on my own. Right, it was that I dedicated that full year into proving to myself that I could actually manage a full-time corporate role in Excel. I could manage a business where I had clients and revenue being generated, and a podcast that was scaling to a global audience. And so that kind of proved to myself that I was ready.
So let's talk about self-awareness for a moment, because a statement that you made just a moment ago, that others that you were around had identified some strengths and some abilities, let's say, that you had that maybe you weren't necessarily paying attention to, or maybe hadn't identified as clearly as those around you had. So, and I look at that sometimes as blind spots. And I know you work with a number of clients, and in the work that I do with clients, that's a really interesting type of conversation to have, because when you walk into a situation and you're not intimately involved, right? You're being brought in from the outside. You have a very different perspective, and you can see things differently than the person who's on the inside of the situation that's in it all day, every day. Would you agree with that?
100%.
So then I look at the situation with you being in the corporate role that you were in, and then others giving you really solid feedback, letting you know that, hey, man, you're incredible in this area, right? You're a great You're a great trainer. You're great at building courses. All of these things that you do today. So I just bring that up because I think it's so important for all of us to understand the value of self-awareness and being surrounded by others who can give us really good, honest, candid feedback.
Yeah, 100%. Especially, and when you say candid, Jay, it's you don't even ask for it, right? They're just literally offering it up because of something that you've said or that you've done or how you've treated them, right? And so, one of the things I learned from my great grandmother was full-blooded Chippewa Indian, and she, when I was like 6 or 7, started telling me about the golden rule, right? The way that you want to be treated, and so that's something that really really stuck with me from her. And so I've always tried to be empathetic. I think I learned empathy from her, but also growing up with a mom with one lung, I mean, I learned a lot about empathy from those hospital visits when she would have the tracheotomy and we'd have to communicate via paper. I had to, I'd learn a lot of empathy at a young age, seeing her in pain, and I think, when you are in environments like that, it really does carry with you on your journey, And so, like, when I was at Gables and as a property manager, I would always hate to have to fire somebody, because I cared so much about the impact that it would cause on them, even if it was the right thing to do because of poor performance, right? But that's, so when I think about professional development and taking that introspective look, doing things like MBTI, which I'm certified in, or diving into emotional intelligence, which the baseline is understanding that self-awareness piece before you can learn how to manage yourself and then manage your relationships in those social settings, those 4 buckets, right? So all of it's super important. And Jay, I would definitely be misinforming you if I told you that teaching that program really was a big catalyst that prepared me to do what I'm doing today. Because at the end of 6 months, even in the first cohort, people literally told me their lives were changed. And man, when you can be a vehicle that guides people to becoming a better version of them, not just in a professional context, but in a personal context, like my marriage is getting better now because of how I'm showing up in my relationship, man, like that is worth its weight in gold. And so that was also a big part for me being able to go out on my own, because I said, if I can have this impact in 6 months, what type of impact can I have working with people on a longer scale, like a year? What type of impact can I make for them? And so I said to myself, like, I want to be in the game of transformation. I want to transform my clients in some capacity, whether it's from the leadership context, the marketing, or the sales context. But I want to give more than I take. So I want to give way more value than I take. And that's just how I've always been, I think, in life. So
Yeah, that's so powerful, Jordan. It truly is. I think about the impact and the transformation that happens when anytime you're in a coaching situation in what you just described, when you're changing lives, when you're improving someone's outcomes, that's an awesome responsibility. And when I say awesome, I mean it's a real responsibility that we take very seriously. And so I'd love to, since you touched on this, I want to pull on this thread for a moment, and that's around emotional intelligence.
yeah.
And you talked about those 4 buckets. So let's go into that a little bit so we can get some clarity on what emotional intelligence is for those that are listening right now and would like maybe a bit more detail. So unpack that for us and talk about those 4 buckets, please.
Yeah. So intelligence, really is showing people how you show up, right? And it's kind of like a scorecard of how you're showing up in the world, right? And the first bucket of EQ is, and also to kind of separate IQ versus EQ, EQ, and again, this is debatable. We'd probably have an hour discussion of what our opinions are on this, but most people believe that IQ is something that you've got. It doesn't really change over time. You've got it. And EQ is something that you can actually increase those muscles by working on each of the buckets, right? And so it starts with self-awareness. Are you aware of how you show up to the world, right? Are you aware of how you show up in your everyday environment? The second bucket goes into self-management, so can you manage those emotions that you're showing? What do you do if you get into a situation? Do you take a walk? What are those different things that you can actually do to manage yourself? And then it goes into relationship management. How good are you at managing relationships? Do you stay true to what your commitments are? Do you set boundaries? Like all of those types of things. And then, of course, social setting. Okay, how do you show up in social settings when you're in public, when you're in public places, when you're on a Zoom call? How are you aware of how you're actually showing up there? And so, there's a really great book, and I'd like to plug this book. I don't get any credit for this, but used in the leadership program I facilitated. It's called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. Okay. I'm not sure if you've seen it, Jay, but the book's incredible. You buy the book. In the back of the book, there's an assessment. And that assessment actually, you go online, you plug in the code, and it gives you an EQ assessment. And it'll literally tell you where you score in each of the 4 buckets. Okay, and so when you get it, it literally goes into details like this is why, this is what you can do to improve it, increase those muscles, because people with higher EQs make way more money, because they're self-aware, they know how to manage, they know how to not yell at somebody, right? They can kind of carry that stuff in. They know that in social settings they're not going to be the one throwing up in the bushes, right? So there's all of these things, and when you can get those buckets dialed in, and again, it's a lifelong process. This isn't you're just going to be instantly amazing at it. Well, I know one thing for me, I really believe that adversity, it gives us strength, but it also heightens our EQ, right? Because we become more aware because of the circumstances and the situations we've been through, where you're able to see through a lens that most people can't. When you think about those deep experiences, death-defying type experiences, man, it's almost like your awareness increases to another level.
Yeah. So in the book that you're mentioning, and of course we'll link to this in the show notes.
Yeah.
But in addition to the assessment and identifying where you rank, let's say, in each of those 4 areas, then once you have that information, does the book also then walk you through how
100%.
you?
Yep.
Okay, perfect.
It
So
walks you
it's
through
really
different scenarios that walks you
good.
through ways that you can increase those muscles. Because again, just like with creating content, right? Getting in front of people on Facebook Live, what do you have to do? You got to be consistent at it. Well, if you want to increase your EQ, you got to be consistent at it. You've got to first be able to identify. You've got to literally become self-aware, right, of how you show up. Okay, that's the first step. Once you're self-aware, then you can figure out how to manage yourself, manage those emotions. And listen, everybody's going to be different. And here's the other thing, Jay. I was pissed. I'll be honest. I was pissed when I got my results. And I'll tell you why. Okay. Because it said my lowest area was relationship management. And I am, out of all my friends, the one that gets us all together. I'm the one that calls them on their birthday. I literally am the one that keeps those relationships together. And it's not just that way for my friends, but it's that way with my brothers, with my family. There's people that if I didn't call them, they probably wouldn't call me, because I think they almost expect that I'm going to do that. And so when I took this assessment, since I do that naturally, it's just how I am, how I'm ingrained, I didn't score myself well. Because guess who's scoring yourself on this assessment? You are, right?
You
so
are.
I'm the one that scored myself. I didn't see that as a strength because it comes natural, because I do it all the time. Does that make sense?
It does. That's so interesting.
I want to give that context for the audience, because if you take this assessment and then you get one of these buckets and it's the lowest and you're pissed, just remember what I said. Like, think about it. Like, okay, let me think about, this self-awareness. Maybe I'm so self-aware that I don't give myself credit. So don't like knock yourself like I did. Like, actually take a step back, or reach out to, a consultant, someone that can debrief it with you before you go off the deep end, because it's very easy to do. It's very easy to jump to conclusions and say, man, maybe I'm not good at building relationships. Like, second guess yourself,
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I want to tie back to something else that you said when you first started talking about EQ and kind of the comparison between IQ and EQ. And I want to touch on mindset, because the comment that you made is, when it comes to IQ, many times we think that's a fixed number. But let's talk about a fixed versus a growth mindset. So, how does mindset play a role in your world and in the work that you do? And talk about the difference, if you can, between someone who, through your experience, someone who has a fixed mindset where they think that whatever gifts I was born with, that's all I've got, and then someone with a growth mindset.
Oh, well, it's very easy for me because I've been both. I've been someone with a fix, also called a scarcity mindset, right? Because I grew up super poor, man. I grew up with food stamps, and I thought everybody had pink lunch tickets. Like everyone had free lunch. I didn't kind of know any better. But growing up then, I knew I would never go to college because I didn't enjoy school and probably couldn't afford it, right? These are things that I told myself. I told myself I would never make more than 50,000. Like I literally told myself these things because of the environment I grew up in. And so how did I get out of that? Well, it was at the age of 14, I got introduced to sales. I got introduced to door-to-door sales. And so my first job in 8th grade, the Oregonian newspaper had distributors that would put ads out and try to find, middle school and high school kids, and literally would drop us off in a neighborhood, give us a clipboard, and we would go knock on doors and try to get people to sign up for the newspaper. Right. And so for some of your audience, a newspaper is this piece of, no, I'm just kidding. Nobody reads newspapers now. So anyway, this was the best job I've ever had until my current job of having my own business. And I'll tell you why. Because on that day, I went out and I knocked on 100 doors, probably a little more than that. And every single person told me no. And I'll tell you, I had a smile on my face at the first door. By number 10, I was defeated. And so I probably looked terrible by number 50. And so by 100, where was my body language, Jay? What did I look like? What do you think my demeanor looked like? And so when I was sitting on that curb at the end of the night, so defeated and negged out because my buddy Steve from down the street and my brother David were high-fiving because they got sales and I didn't. I didn't want to go back and settle up. I wasn't excited about that, Jay, but when I did settle up, the distributor, he said something to me that's super, super powerful. I didn't understand it then, and I do now, and I hope this will give your audience value. He said, the sale doesn't start until the customer says no. And I looked at him and I said, that's the dumbest thing I've ever heard, Jim. Can you please take me home? And it wasn't until a number of years later, Jay, when I had become a sales trainer at 18 years old and had a guy out in the field for his first day. He came with that same defeated look on his face, and I looked him in his eyes and I said, the sale doesn't start until the customer says no. And what does that mean? Well, most of the time, if you think about consumers, when you go into a department store, when someone says, hey, can I help you? What do you usually say? No, I'm good.
Just looking.
Right? Just looking. No, I'm good. Right? When we were kids, though, we were ingrained with the word no. Say no to drugs. No, you can't have dessert. No, you can't go outside. No, don't touch the stove. So it's very natural as humans, an instinct to, when a salesperson approaches you, whether it's phone or in person or email, to say no. That's just a natural instinct. And so I had to get good so I did go back for day 2, by the way. And I did get some sales that day, and I ended up being the top salesperson later. But here's what worked for me. As I started to realize that I had to really use my environment to my advantage. So I would look at flags that they had. I would look at the type of car. Was there anything that I could mention right when they opened that door so I could grab their attention and break that ice? And so if it was like a Portland Trailblazers flag, be like, they'd open the door and be like, go Blazers, hey, great game last week, and they'd be like, yeah, and they'd be like, what are you up to, kid, but I would break the ice. And so I figured out how valuable eye contact was, the importance of a smile, how to read people, how to relax, how to relate, how to be empathetic if I woke up their baby. Like, I learned all these things at 14 years old, and man, those lessons have carried me on to having a growth mindset, to thinking differently, to understanding that no doesn't mean no, it means next opportunity. and that if you go and look for no's, yeses will come a lot better and a lot easier because you're not paying attention to trying to find the yeses. So again, I went from that fixed mindset to a growth, and it started at 14.
Wow.
And so having that and learning those lessons and hearing thousands of people tell you no as a teenager, man, does that translate as you grow up and as you work other roles.
Such an important lesson. Such an important lesson. And the way that you framed it through the story that you told, I think is absolutely perfect, because we can all put ourselves in that situation where either the door is closed on us, or we're involved in a situation where someone's asking us to either buy something or to consider something. And normally the first thing that happens, unless there's a direct emotional connection, unless there's an absolute need right then and there, the wall comes up. We immediately say no. So the power of no. Love that one. So something else that you mentioned that I want to tie back to, and that is around Myers-Briggs. So you are a certified Myers-Briggs practitioner, and share with our audience, those that may not be familiar with that, because we find that very often in a corporate type environment, but share with us what the Myers-Briggs is and tell us about your particular personality type.
Oh, yeah, no, I would love to. So, the Myers-Briggs MBTI, it's the most widely used personality assessment out there, right? And the reason why it's the most widely used, and it's used in more countries and more universities than any other one, is because it's been out for a really long time. And so there's tons and tons of data. And so, when I'm speaking with clients, I have some clients that I take them through the assessment. I do the debrief with them, and then some, they're like, "Hey, I don't want to pay for this. Is there another resource?" And I'll say, "Yeah, just Google MBTI." And there's free ones out there, and the free ones are good. They're not going to be as accurate as the paid, again, because of the data and research that goes into that. If that makes sense, Jay. So, So the assessment, what is it looking at? Well, it's looking first. It's going to help you populate a 4-letter personality type. And so my 4-letter type is ENFP. There's 16 possible, dichotomies of types. And so the E stands for extrovert, right? And so, the extrovert and introvert, these are the energies, the attitudes that we carry within us. And so people that prefer extroversion get their energy from the outer world, right? I get the energy from being around people, being at events, being on cool shows like this where I get to really talk and communicate. Whereas introverts, they get their energy from the internal world on the inside, right? So they prefer smaller group gatherings, and they might show up to the party but probably will leave early. There's things like that. And so that's just the first letter, right? And so each of the letters has different things that really express how we show up into the world. And so for me, the N, it's N, but it's really intuition is what it stands for. And so I'm a very big picture thinker, creative, like futuristic. I'm always thinking really, really large. And so, that's definitely, it really is who I am to a core. The F is a feeler. And so a feeler, it's not, it's more about, caring about the impact on others, right? So like I mentioned that earlier, where if I had to fire somebody, it was super hard to do, even if it was the right thing to do, because I would think about how this would impact their family, like their bottom line and things like that. And then the final one, the P, is a perceiving type, okay? And so a perceiving type is somebody that is just very go with the flow, nonchalant. I'm the type of person that could literally put a bunch of countries or cities on a wheel, spin it, land on it, grab a backpack, and get on a flight and go there. So I'm just very spontaneous, and that's what the P is, And so that's what you get with me. I'm an extroverted, intuitive feeler that's very spontaneous.
Love that. Do you thrive in chaos?
I thrive in chaos. Yeah, I have to have multiple things going on at once. If you put me in front of just one thing and tell me I have to focus on it, it's very, very hard.
Yeah, I feel you on that one. It's really interesting.
And so listen, one thing I tell everybody is the assessment's great. Listen, I'm certified. The assessment's phenomenal, but we are way more than our type, right? The type is just kind of like, it's like a foundation, right? You need to understand how you're wired, because when you can understand yourself, when you have that self-awareness, it's a lot easier to understand other people, right? When you can really take that dive into yourself, especially with some of the more elevated workbooks, like when we talk about the grip. And what the grip is when our inferior functions take over, right? And so like I'm an extrovert naturally, so inferior to that would be my introvert, right? And so what happens is you literally flip-flop yourself, and you've seen the Snickers commercials, right? When someone is like, "Hey, you're not being yourself," and it's like, eat a Snickers. Like, that's called being in the grip. It's when our inferior functions take over. So I become, an introverted feeler. So I literally get all in my feelings and I get quiet, when I'm in the grip, when I'm really, really stressed out. And for most people that know me, they're like, "What's wrong? You never stop talking," right? And so it's easy for people to identify. And so once you can identify that about yourself, man, very powerful, right? Because then you know how to get yourself back out. Because there's plenty of people today that are literally grip without knowing it, and they don't know how to get themselves out of it.
Wow. And then also, what a great way of being able to identify how I can connect with someone else who
100%.
has a different type of personality type. So when it comes to communication, as an example, we all communicate differently, right?
100%.
We all receive information differently. So I can definitely see where that.
And listen, and to that point, Jay,
Yeah.
things that I talk to people about is you've got to be flexible. Just because you're wired a certain type doesn't mean you can use that preference all the time. Because I can tell you this, even though I prefer not to do dishes, if I didn't do dishes every once in a while, I probably wouldn't be married, right? So like, our preferences are our preferences, but we've got to be flexible in our relationships. We've got to be flexible with our coworkers, right? It's super important.
Yeah, for sure. So let's talk about networking and the power of building relationships and growing a community and growing an audience. So I look at your numbers in which you've been able to amass. And Jordan, I know that you've done that over a relatively short period of time. So speak to that. And as you do, talk about why building a network is so important. And then I'm going to ask you to speak to an audience member who is, let's say, relatively new in the business space, maybe an entrepreneur who's just starting a business and they don't have a network today. So what advice would you share with them? And you take those questions and answer them any way you see fit.
Yeah, perfect. Okay, so I got started actually. It's funny because it was a goal. I got a corporate goal, and it was a platform where we can get our associates engaged. And so I researched Facebook. I did looked at LinkedIn Learning. I looked at Snapchat. I was just trying all these platforms, and then I just logged into LinkedIn one day in April of 2019, and I noticed that it was different. Like, it had changed. There was people on video. There was, all these different things. It wasn't just like static text as like it was, a number of years before when I really paid attention to it. And so I came across a guy named Brian Schulman. Shout out to you, brother. He's been a mentor of mine. And it was on a Wednesday, and he did this post, this thing he's done for every Wednesday for a couple of years now called What's Good Wednesday. And literally all it's about is you come on and you just let everyone know what's good on that day. And it's super supportive and inclusive, and I vibed with it because I'm positive, I'm optimistic, and so I was like, wow, this is cool. I love this. So I started following him, and then on Saturday he did another one called Shout Out Saturday, and you literally just come and you shout out someone, like showing gratitude to somebody. And I'm like, man, like, this guy's super cool. Let me send him a connection request. Like, let me get on the phone with this. I need to talk to this guy because I don't know what it is, but I see something and I feel like I don't know, there's something here. So I get on a call with the guy in May of 2019, and I just kind of tell him what I do. I do training. This is what I've done. This is how I've built it. And he's like, man, like, you need to be you need to be creating videos on LinkedIn. I was like, what am I going to create video? He's like, man, you're an expert in sales and marketing and leadership. You're doing all these amazing things. He's like, man, if you start creating, you can have a brand way bigger than me. And for some reason, Jay, I believed him, and I posted that first video. And listen, the first video, I asked if anyone knew about social media and social media strategy. So rewind to April 2019. Now my business is predicated on what? Teaching people social media strategy, sales, marketing, consulting, right? And so it's funny what can happen in less than 2 years, because that was less than 2 years ago. We're in February, that was April of 19. So and so what's happened over time, Jay, because I started showing up, because I started putting myself out there, I started to build an audience. And by December of 19, I had amassed 20,000 followers. I was at 7,000 in April. And then you fast forward 2020, I gained another 40,000 followers in 2020, creating less content than I did in 2019, which showed me that the community was still strong. And then now I'm just about to approach, I think, 62,000 or something like that in 22 months. And so, what would I tell somebody just starting out? I would say, just show up. You've got to start showing up. Everybody has a story, everybody has a journey, everybody has a message, and you can add value to more people than you think.
Excellent advice. So what would you say to those that use LinkedIn that are looking to connect with you? You don't know them, right? But they send you a connection request. You or I accept that connection request. And then within 5 minutes, we get a message trying to sell us something, service, product. What would you say to that person who's trying to sell?
Yeah, I would say, why are you skipping to dessert before the appetizer? Because that's exactly what you're doing. Can you remember back to your first date?
Oh, yes.
Okay, did you start with dessert or with the appetizers first? And in the wine, the glass of wine, right?
There was a process to it, Jordan.
Process. That's exactly it. And it's interesting you brought up that question, because what I started doing is every person that throws up a pitch, I coach them now for free. I say, listen, hey, I appreciate you sending this, but do you think this is the right approach? ? And some people respond and get coaching and hop on a call with me, and I've turned some of them into clients, and some people don't respond at all. But I'm not doing it to get clients. I'm doing it to educate, because there's so much misinformation out there. There's so many automated softwares that are trying to be human, but the only way to be human is to be human, is for you to show up. And so, one of the things that I've been testing over the last couple of years on LinkedIn is, voice messages, sending voice messages over text response, and also video messages back. If somebody sends me a message, I'll send them a video message back, and so mixing up the mediums is a way to kind of enhance the communication between a new contact.
Beautiful. And where are you seeing more engagement right now? So if you're really paying attention, whether it's voice, whether it's video, whether it's text, what are you finding right now?
I'm having trouble managing the inbox, the inbox, because when you make changes to your profile, like I launched the business and had an anniversary with the show, so I've got thousands of messages. So my inbox right now, Jay, I would say I couldn't answer that question because it's inundated, but it's one of those things that I think they need to work on, from a tool perspective, because it's just not conducive for real deep conversations. Now, I will say, to their credit, they've added a few integration tools recently. They've added the ability to integrate Microsoft Teams or Zoom into the message sequence and literally create that meeting natively in the app, in the mobile app. And so I do like that you're able to do that, to take that online, offline, really, because that should be the goal, right? But the goal is you've got to build a relationship first, right? And so can I give people would it be valuable, Jay, if I gave people a framework? Like, if you get a connection request and accept it, what your first message to this person should be? Would that be
I think
helpful?
absolutely. I think we would all benefit from that.
Okay, perfect. So here's what I would say, and you can use it verbatim. I recommend you use your own style because we're all different. We've all got different personalities. But we'll use you as the example, Jay. So we first connected. So I would say, hello, Jay. Thank you so much for connecting. Right? I'm leading with what? Gratitude. Okay. First thing, always, thank you so much for connecting! Exclamation point. I want you to know I'm thankful. The next line is, if I can ever be of assistance, let me know. So gratitude and service, value, right? So gratitude and value, okay? And then I'm going to open up the next statement. Hey, and so this is going to be, it might be a directive, right? I might say, hey, I had an amazing conversation with Jay Sure on his podcast, and I'd love for you to check out a link to the full episode. I really would appreciate your feedback. Boom. Thanks, Jordan, right? So what did I do? Well, I thanked you. I offered you assistance without any expectation, just to offer value to you. And then I just simply said, hey, I'd love your feedback on this. Right. And so if you can use that framework with every person that you connect with, that's going to start the relationship on a strong note.
That's fantastic. Well, I appreciate you sharing that. Let me ask you one thing about the third step in that. So if you're going to provide some information of value, do you go to the step of customizing that content? So as an example,
100%.
let's say okay, so the person that you're sending the message to, you find out that they're in the content marketing space, and maybe you did a podcast with a content marketing expert. So then you would tie that back to something that they
100%.
are interested in.
If you make it more, the more personalized and contextual you can make it, the better. And that's with everything. Right? That's with your clients, that's with prospects, I think just in life, you want to be more personal. And that's why, when I launched my business and I didn't have the corporate guys over me, right, where I was kind of limiting the way that I could build my own LinkedIn profile. If you go, and if anybody that listens to this episode goes and reads my profile now, before you hear anything about what I do from a business perspective, you're going to learn a lot about me. You're going to learn about my mom. You're going to learn about 3 pivotal moments in my life, and the 4th, which was stepping out into entrepreneurship. And man, when you can give people deep context about you as a human, because again, LinkedIn is about human connection. It's not about, a human to a business. It's we're humans at the end of the day. And so for me, the way that I teach my clients to do it is you got to start with a story. Give people context into who you are, your journey, what you failed at, what you've been through. Because man, Jay, business becomes a lot easier after that. When the veil is off,
Yes.
it becomes a lot easier.
You are so right. And I'll just share with you, earlier in my career, and this is something that I had to learn the hard way, I spent so much time not showing who I am at the core because I was showing up the way I thought others needed me to show up and the way that I was being incentivized based on performance. And what was happening, though, is I wasn't allowing who I truly am to be front and center and build those kinds of deep, meaningful relationships. So I hear you loud and clear. So I have definitely, and it's something that I continue to work on, but I definitely have realized that this is what it's about, man. I mean, it is about human connection. It's about having deep, meaningful conversations and figuring out ways that we can support and bring value and pour value into someone's world.
100%.
Share with us what are 1 to 2 books. You already mentioned one, but what are 1 to 2 books that have had a significant impact on your life and the way that you show up today?
All right, number 1, Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. You familiar with it, Jay?
Very familiar with it. I have it right here.
Amazing book, and actually a new book I just started, but I already know it's going to be impactful. Actually, a previous podcast guest, Mark Victor Hansen, and his wife, Crystal Victor Hansen, co-wrote their first book, and it's called Ask, The Bridge from Your Dreams to Your Destiny. And it's filled with stories of people that have asked, that have yourself, asked, asked others, and asked God as well. So, I mean, incredible book. I can't wait to really dive into that one. But, asking has gotten me a lot, right? And not asking has cost me a lot. And the sooner you can realize that you need to ask more often, but not just asking to ask for stuff, but like asking yourself, am I in the right place right now? Is this the right decision for me? Asking yourself those questions. So that's why I'm excited about that, because there's countless stories in here of people that asked and have done things exceedingly, abundantly beyond what they ever thought they could do because they asked.
Love that. I'll definitely have to check that one out. Thank you for sharing. So, what would you like your legacy to be, Jordan?
I learned this actually, I think it was last February. I had a guy on my podcast by the name of David Meltzer. He's the founder and CEO of Sports One Marketing. And he said something to me that I will never forget. And I told myself that I wanted to really emulate that, And what he said to me is that he wants to plant seeds for trees that he will never sit under. And that's something that resonated so deep with me, and that I really want to do is I want to leave the world a better place through, educating people on how to tell their story, on how to blaze their own trail, how to take the adversities in their life and use them as fuel to get them to where they want to go. Because, most people, there's a very fine line when it comes from like a victim or a victor, right? And people that have that victim mentality often don't become the victor because they don't realize that they need to invest in themselves. They need to start investing in professional development, and then they need to put some skin in the game and invest in other people like coaches and mentors and people that are where they want to be. And so for me in my life, when I think about what have been those really pivotal changing moments, it's when I started to bet on myself and invest in myself, and then things started to really shift.
Man, so well said. And David is an amazing human being. I know our audience are quite familiar with David, his philosophies, and just what an incredible person that he is. So before I ask my final question to you, where can we go to connect and consume your content?
Yeah, so definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. I am maxed out at connections, but if anybody can message me. I have a premium account, so whether we're connected or not, if you have questions, if what I said was valuable and you just have a question about how to navigate LinkedIn or anything that I've talked about, send me a message. I'm open to it. Send me a message. I'd love to be able to resource you or help you in any way. Also on Instagram, at Jordan J. Mendoza, the same. As well on Twitter. And Jay, if you don't mind, I would love, one thing I do is want to provide as much value as I can to you and your audience. So if anybody that hears this episode, just DM me on Instagram, Jordan J. Mendoza. If you DM me the keyword Blaze, okay, I'll actually give you $500 off my 12-week LinkedIn course. Okay. And so that course, it takes people from optimization to monetization, meaning during the 12 weeks, they'll learn how to dial that profile in, how to create content, how to engage, how to take the online offline to actually start adding revenue to their business.
Outstanding. Thank you for sharing that with all of us. And again, we'll make sure that we link to everything that we've discussed here in the show notes. That way, anyone that's interested can certainly dig deeper, learn more about you, and then make that kind of connection. So here is my final question to you. What's been the most pivotal learning experience in your professional career to date?
Oh, man, it was my first 3 weeks as a trainer. I got sent down to Florida for an advanced instructor training. and I'm doing air quotes because there was nothing advanced about me, Jay, when I got sent in. And man, it was so valuable because we walk into this room and there's like 25 people. Of course, this is pre-COVID. This is back in 2013 when we could go out and see people, right? So, and we're in this room, and I look at the back, and there's a camera, and I'm like, what's going on here? Yeah, everybody's like, why is there a camera in the back? What's happening? And so we go through this extensive week of training, and we literally have to get up, give a presentation like from content that we teach at our companies, and then work on it and watch the DVD back at night, do some homework. I mean, it was painful, but I experienced so much growth, and I'm better because of it.
Fantastic. I've been through a similar experience before, so I feel you on that. But it really is amazing what happens when you're able to look back and see your own performance, get good feedback, fine-tune certain areas, and then show up better the next time. Great example. Thank you. And thank you so much for being here today. I appreciate you sharing of your knowledge, your experience, and sharing so much great information with all of us. And I look forward to continuing to develop our relationship and seeing where we can grow together. So thank you. Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Absolutely. And for all of you, thank you so very much for watching and listening. And please take a moment to subscribe and let us know what you think about this episode. What were one or two key takeaways that you had from this one? So share that in the comments, and also share this with someone else who you think could benefit from what you learned here today. That would be outstanding. To enjoy more episodes and to learn how Jay Shear Business Consulting can help your small business build a solid foundation, visit jshearbusinessconsulting.com. And until next time, keep learning and growing, and let nothing stop you from blazing your own trail. And we'll see you on the next Business Minds Coffee Chat. Take care.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear.
Jay Shear. Jay Shear.
Business Consultant.
Jay Shear Business Consulting.